Wow, when you ask me what got me interested in cars to begin with, I don't remember becoming interested in cars. I was born into this. Well, my name is Chip Foose, and I'm the owner of Foose Design, and it's where we design and build one-off cars for private individuals. My father built custom cars. My earliest memories are when I was about 3 years old. I would go to the AMT shop, which was Gene Winfield's shop in Phoenix, Arizona. My father worked for Gene, and I would go on the weekends with my dad, and I would watch he and the crew build these fantastic custom cars that later became the plastic AMT model kits. My dad would bring the model kits home, and then I was busy putting the same car together that I watched them build. And at the same time, Hot Wheels was building Hot Wheels of those same cars, so I always had Hot Wheels in my pockets and the plastic model kits of the cars that I watched Gene, my father, and the crew build. And to this day, I'm still living my childhood. I grew up working in my father's shop, and I was a painter for my dad as well as custom car builder. And you know, at my dad's shop, it was a custom shop and a crash shop. And you know, I loved doing both. But in his shop, if you were doing a crash project, and that means, you know, a crashed car comes into the shop, they write a ticket on it. I actually wrote a lot of the estimates also. But if you got that project, you did the entire project yourself. At my dad's shop, we did everything from start to finish. And so I learned how to do so many different things. And then I grew up building custom cars with my dad. I went to Art Center. My senior project was the Plymouth Prowler. I designed the Prowler for Chrysler. Well, to say that I designed the Prowler would be a slap in the face to the designers and engineers that finished it, but my model was the inspiration for the Prowler. Boyd Coddington, at the time, he had probably the #1 hot rod shop in the country. He saw my model and asked me to start doing some work for him. So I had my full-time job in Santa Barbara, California, but I was working an average of 30 to 50 hours a week for Boyd, just as a hobby. And later, when I ended up leaving Osha Corporation in Santa Barbara, I went to work full-time for Boyd Coddington. I worked with Boyd for a total of 8 years, and he went bankrupt in 1998. That's when I left and started Foose Design, and I've never looked back, and I've had an absolute dream job my whole life. What designers most influenced me? Well, all the custom car builders, because we were busy going to all the car shows, and I was also going to the drag races. But I remember, you know, I loved what Ed Roth was doing with those crazy fun cars. And I loved what my father and Gene were doing. They were still pretty wild cars, but my father left Gene and started his own shop. And what I loved about my dad's work, he started working with Alex Tremulous, Alex worked for Auburn Cord Duesenberg. He designed the Tucker. He was the head of the Thunderbird studio. And he and my father were working together, and they were just building beautiful, timeless custom cars. And that's what really influenced me the most, is to this day, if something seems trendy, I'll turn and run 180 degrees from it. I don't want to be trendy because trendy dates something. I want to do good design that is timeless. Not long after Boyd's had collapsed, I started my own little shop. Tiny little place. It was 1,400 square feet in Orange, California. And a friend of mine called me. His name was Bill Cook. He called me up and he says, "Hey, I've got some guys that they're doing a movie and they need some Mustangs built. Are you interested in building some Mustangs?" I said, "Well, how many?" He says, "We need 15 in 4 weeks." And I said, "Well, come see me." So he and a gentleman named Jeff Mann, who was the art director for Gone in 60 Seconds, he came down and they showed me a piece of artwork that Steve Stanford had drawn. And it was a beautiful drawing, but it looked more like a, shall we call it a high school hot rod, you know, a custom car. And I thought, great, does it have to be this, or can I redesign it and make it look like what Shelby would have drawn, with cut lines and part lines, and make it look like production parts rather than something that looked like widened or flared fenders. And I did those sketches, did the design, we did the clay model, and Jeff Mann tells me that we have a review from Jerry Bruckheimer. Now, there was another group that was building a Mustang at the same time. but Jeff wasn't happy with it because of those, didn't have the part lines and whatnot and looked like a custom Mustang. So we went to the review with my car, which was basically just a clay model that we primered, and we had it just in primer, and I laid out some graphics on it. We took it to the review. Now, Ray Claridge from Cinema Vehicle Services had his finished, painted, polished, done car there. And I thought, well, he's gonna go for Ray's. But Jerry Bruckheimer came out, he looked at both, and I explained to him what the differences were and why I did what I was doing. Now, I only had 2 weeks to get to that point. I don't know how long Ray had been working on his, but Jerry says, I want this one, and he pointed to mine and he wanted it. And I walked over to Ray Claridge, who had 300 employees. Now, I had just a couple guys in my shop, and we were just doing what we could do. And I walked over to Ray Claridge and I said, look, I don't have the staff to do what you're doing. You keep building the cars the way you're building, and I'll supply you with all the parts so we can build these together. And that's exactly what we did. We delivered 7 cars in the 4 weeks, and then we gave them 2 cars a day until we completed the list. They gave us a list of the cars they needed. They needed cars that could be filmed going straight. They needed cars that could corner. They needed cars that could jump. They needed cars that were cut up so they could do filming, through the body. It was an awesome job. And the greatest part about that is Jeff comes to me one day and he says, hey, do you know where we can get some sheet metal equipment? Now, I was just starting my shop, and I knew of a gentleman that had passed away and the family was selling all of his tools. And I said, well, how much is the rent? What's it pay? He gave me a number that was more than they wanted for the tools. So I said, will you pay in advance? He gave me a check. I put that in the bank. I went and bought all the tools. I gave them the address where to pick everything up. They used it in Otto's shop in the movie. And then after the movie, when they were done filming, everything got delivered back to my shop and I outfitted my shop. That was being at the right place at the right time. One of my good friends was Christopher Titus. And if you remember the Titus show back in around 2000, 2001, Christopher Titus, his show was about his dysfunctional family, but he was also a hot rod builder as his career on the show. When you came to Boyd's originally,
yep,
told me you were going to have a TV show.
And I was.
And then you disappeared.
And I went to use life, and then nothing happened.
Then you came back.
Then I came back, and what did I do?
But we stayed friends.
And what did I do? I had a TV show.
You did?
Yeah, based on it. Well, I was a hot rod guy,
It was
and
an awesome
stole
show.
your life and my life. I put my screwed up life with your normal life.
Well, you had the normal family life.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Mine's fine. Yes, right. Right, with the crystal meth and the police. Yes, that was my normal family.
And being that we were friends, he used my career as his career in the show. And whenever there was something that was happening in his shop, 90% of that was based on something that had actually happened to me. And it was a pleasure working with Christopher and all the guys at Fox. But it was interesting because while we were filming the Titus show, I brought Titus to his first movie set, and that was Gone in 60 Seconds. Jesse James, Monster Garage, if you're familiar with that, Jesse called me, told me that he was going to start this show, wanted me to be his co-host. He called me to a meeting. I went to this meeting with a couple Disney executives there, showed them my portfolio. They explained to me the first car we build is going to be a Mustang that we're turning into a lawnmower. Second one is going to be a Ford Explorer that we're going to turn into a trash truck. We're going to build an arm and make it pick up a trash can and dump the trash inside the vehicle. And I thought, that's not something that I want to be known for doing. I'm trying to build the most beautiful pieces of rolling art that I can build. And because these are going to be on television, it'll overshadow what I do. So I said, I'm not interested, and I left. Well, Discovery obviously liked what I had in my portfolio. They sent Bud Brutzman, another producer, over to visit me, and he walks in and says, Discovery wants to do a show with you. I said, what's the show? And he says, we're going to follow you 24/7 until you finish your next car, and we'll follow you to a show. And I said, well, that's 11 months out. You don't want to film for 11 months. I said, let me call Jay Mays, who's the director of design for Ford Motor Company, see if he wants to give us a dollar car, which is what they give to builders to build a car for the SEMA show. Bud says, what's the SEMA show? I said, trust me, that's where you want to go. It's everything in the industry, so everybody will see something that they like on the show. And I called Jay. He said, we're about to launch the new Thunderbird. So he sent me a Thunderbird, and we built a car called the Speedbird, and that was a show called Rides. We filmed that. I lost 27 pounds building that car in less than 7 weeks. We went to the show. We won Best of Show, honored by Ford. They gave us the award. And we finished that show. Bud shipped it to Discovery. They loved it and wanted a series. He comes back to me and says, what are we doing next? I said, I'm not. I gave him a list of 25 shop owners. I said, call these guys, find out when they're starting their next build, send a film crew in once a month, and in 10 months you could have 25 episodes. We can't do that here in one shop. I didn't realize that I just gave him this whole show. But I also said, but I do have an idea for a series. Now, Monster Garage had started to air. And I said, let's do something similar to Monster Garage, but rather than building a car that just performs a task and has no value at the end of the show, let's go find cars that are in garages and side yards with people that they've got them, but they don't have the money or the means to restore them, but it's their dream to do it one day. Let's go get those cars and rebuild them and give them to them as a gift. And Bud had the idea of, let's prank the owner, steal the cars, and mess with them while we build it. He asked me how quick I could build a car, and I said, with the right team, we could do it in a week. That's exactly what we started doing. And we ended up filming about 170 episodes, and it was a blast. We made a lot of people's automotive dreams come true, which is really what motivates you to do it again. Because when you can move somebody to the point of tears with a car, you know you're making some people happy.